Good evening to all. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone attending this special webinar. Well, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a highly delicate issue for India. India is attempting to strike a balance. We are providing medicine, medical equipments, and other relief supplies to Ukraine. Aside from that, India has taken a diplomatically neutral stance on Russia-Ukraine crisis, which is understandable. What does this imply for Indian businesses? That is what we will try to learn from Dr. Badri Narayanan Gopalakrishnan, the country's foremost expert on the issue. I'd like to invite Ryan for a quick introduction of Badri sir. Also, one more thing, the session will start. Y'all can put questions in the chat box, so that will help us, Badri sir, to answer all those questions after the session is over. Thank you. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Neville Bhai. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ryan Fernandez. I'm the Joint Secretary at the Bombay Industries Association. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Badri Narayanan Gopalakrishnan, our speaker for this evening. He is the lead advisor and head Trade, Commerce and Strategic Economic Dialogue, NITI Aayog. He is widely known for his contributions to develop the Global Trade Analysis Project, dataset, and model extensions at Purdue University. Dr. Badri was also a senior fellow, European Center for International Political Economy. He has been a consultant for several organizations such as McKinsey, KPMG, PwC, the World Bank, the United Nations, and Howard. He has published over 150 papers and 8 books in reputed journals such as Nature Communication, Energy Economics, Network and Spatial Economics, Economic Modeling, Applied Economics, etc. And he has presented his work in over 30 countries. Without further delay, I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Badri. We thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope to make this a pleasant one. For all our participants, I'd just like to add on to what Mr. Neville Bhai said. We will be conducting a small Q&A at the end of the session. Please post your questions in the chat, and we will have it moderated by Mr. Ashish Gandhi, who will help us this evening with consolidating those questions and presenting it to Dr. Badri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. And, thank you also, Mr. Sanghi and Mr. Parikshit Tume for inviting me and organizing this. I wish I was able to fly to Mumbai and have it in person to meet all of you in person, but unfortunately, I could not travel because of work schedule. So currently we are in very interesting times when it comes to trade policy. So here in Delhi, we are both Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of External Affairs and other ministries, as well as we at NITI Aayog, we all have been working together to come up with trade policy actions, ideas to benefit our industry, our people. As you all know, we have been working on several free trade agreements. 2 of them have been concluded with the UAE and Australia. In fact, just before this webinar, a couple of hours ago, we also conducted an information webinar on the UAE and Australia free trade agreements, for example, because we have to take the opportunities that some of these policies and agreements are creating to the actual beneficiaries, industries like you. So we have been taking that kind of efforts, and in that process, this is a great opportunity for us to share some learnings we have got from a policy angle, from interactions with the industry and policy between our country and Russia on this issue. So that's the broad aim of this discussion now. And then I wouldn't claim to be an expert in this area because although I'm working on trade policy in general and doing a lot of work on other, export promotion in general, trade policies, strategic dialogue with different countries and so on. Russia is something that I've been working on fairly recently because of the ongoing conflicts and also some kind of agreements that we have been negotiating between India and Russia for the past few months or so. So that's a limited starting point that I have. I don't have a very in-depth knowledge about the subject. So I'll be discussing based on some recent interactions and experiences we got on this topic. So the whole issue of how India is dealing with this current situation and how we are like Mr. Sangvi mentioned, how we are undertaking a very delicate balance between the West on one hand and Russia on the other, because all of them are very important trading partners for us. We cannot favor one over the other. In fact, the EU is one of the largest, both if you take EU and US combined, they are the largest trading partners we have. Whereas Russia has been the most strategically aligned or more processed partner overall, not just trading, but overall partner. So we cannot think about favoring one over the other. We have to delicately balance between the two, and that's exactly the policy stance. We have been very guarded on what to say, what to do in this regard, and we have been engaging both the Western countries and Russia and Ukraine. And you might have seen a lot of travels happening between all these countries and India, senior leaders coming to India, our leaders going to other countries on a very regular basis in the last few weeks. This is all about the ongoing crisis. How do we make sure that first we don't get affected by the crisis in a bad way? Second, how do we identify opportunities that can emerge out of it? So let me first discuss about the macro level benefits and advantages conceptually, and then I'll come to some specific learnings we got from some interactions with people. So at a macro level, the first victim of the conflict is the commodity prices. So we have seen a lot of increases in commodity prices globally and in India, and mainly the fuel prices. And given that we are importing all of our fuel needs, most of our fuel needs, we have been also facing the pressure, the price pressure. Although the price pressure, the inflation that we are seeing is relatively less compared to many other countries in the world, particularly the Western countries, which are used to very low inflation. They are now going through a much higher inflation. Whereas for us, it is still, relatively speaking, not too beyond the usual range, particularly if you look at the consumer prices, the wholesale prices. Wholesale prices are increasing more, but still it is not like extremely worrisome compared to other countries. But yeah, absolutely speaking, it is worrisome because we are in a inflationary situation now. So now that is one major issue. Another issue is the supply chain disruptions because of the conflict. We are a lot of supplies that are coming from Ukraine have got affected, if not totally eliminated. Even to some extent, the trade with Russia has got affected, not because of any sanctions or policy issue from our side, but more because of a lot of logistical hurdles. And similarly, other countries, trade with other countries also got affected to the extent that the global value chains are interlinked between Russia, Ukraine, and other countries. So these are two major broad, threats that have come out of this crisis, and we are handling them carefully at the government level, and also industries are doing a lot of risk mitigation. Now, the opportunities from this situation at a macro level, the first opportunity is to be able to simultaneously uh, benefit from export opportunities in the West, the European countries, and also the countries like Russia and Ukraine. Am I audible enough? I see somebody is saying.
Yeah, I think little. I think if you can put the mic near your this thing, basically, little. The sound can improve if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
Mic near.
Okay.
You.
Is it better now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
super. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, sorry about that. So I think probably I don't have to repeat what I said, but broadly I was just talking about the macro level opportunities and threats that we are facing now because of the ongoing conflicts. The broad threats are commodity price increases, supply chain disruptions, those two mainly, and the opportunities I was just beginning to talk. The first opportunity is that we are able to export to the Western countries, filling in for Russia and Ukraine. Wherever the Russia and Ukraine were exporting whichever commodities to the West, we can actually get into them. Russia, because obviously they have imposed sanctions on Russia, so we can export whatever Russia was exporting if we have the capacity. So we just have to do that calculation, which sectors can we focus on. Secondly, we are also getting the opportunity to export what Ukraine was exporting. That's because Ukraine has lost its productive capacity for now in the foreseeable future. So again, that's another opportunity. And from a point of view of Russia and Ukraine, particularly, with Russia, again, we can export a lot because Russia is totally isolated. A lot of countries are not exporting things that they have been importing a lot, starting from basic necessities to high-end things like electronics and so on. So we have a lot of opportunity there. Similarly, for Ukraine also, we still have good relations with Ukraine, and we can continue to do a lot of humanitarian aid there and also commercial trade there. So that's the, I would say, the broad set of opportunities that we have. And if you look at it from the light of two more developments that we have broadly, then things look much more optimistic. Another development is that in the context of this conflict and continuing from the COVID and the post-COVID supply chain disruptions and supply chain resilience initiatives and so on, there is a broad trend of industries and investments moving out of China and coming to us. And that's another opportunity. So we can enhance our capacities. We can have more joint ventures and collaborations with global companies who are moving their base to India, away from China. So that's another set of things that is happening. And the third set of things includes purely our domestic policy. So on the domestic front, the government is working very hard to promote investments, to improve the investment climate, to improve the infrastructure. A lot of strategies to enhance the infrastructure. It could be like ULIP or Gati Shakti and so on, or the production linked incentive scheme. So all these things are going on to, for the first time in several years, we are explicitly talking about boosting our scales of production and intensifying the investments in infrastructure from a very concerted and coordinated perspective between all the different departments, ministries, and organizations of the government. So this is just to set a stage broadly where we are given this crisis. Now, in terms of the specifics of our relationship with Russia, because that is the main focus of our discussion today. And I'll also again want to reiterate the fact that my knowledge about India-Russia relations and the trade and the collaborations now is relatively fresh. Actually, I've been dealing with this only very recently. So this session is as much of a a session in which I'm here to learn from you as much as it is I can share whatever I know. So please pardon me for the lack of comprehensive coverage of the issues, if you feel so, because I'm also here to hear from you. The first thing to note is the trade between Russia and India. It has been a pretty sizable number. For example, in 2020, despite the fact that we had a huge decline in trade with many countries in the 20s and 30s percentage change, with Russia, we only decreased it by around 17%. Whereas with many other countries, we decreased our trade by 20, 30, 40% because of the COVID related demand shocks. So with Russia, after that decrease, we had around $9.2 billion of trade between India and Russia. So a lot of the trade has been happening between the far eastern regions in Russia and India. More than I think around 10%, more than 10% of the trade comes from that region, and then the remaining part is from the other region. But within that, in that region, 90% of the exports, from that region is the export of precious stones. So that is one thing to think about. Like in general, Russia is rich in minerals and heavy manufacturing, and this is one example. Precious stones and other minerals. So that is one thing. And also there has also been a lot of investments between India and Russia in mutual countries. India also has been, our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, in 2019 actually proposed to implement a line of credit of around $1 billion for Russia's far eastern territories, as I was telling you before because of its strategic significance. And also private investments are also happening, starting from offshore hydrogen production to diamond cutting to tea packaging. So these all have been a lot of ongoing investments from Indian companies in Russia, and there are several other areas as well. And just in the far eastern region, the investments from India to Russia has been around $1 billion. And the other thing is, forestry products are also very important. We have timber in Russia that can be imported. You also have oil and gas, which is a major, which is one of their major exports, and it's also a lot of water resources. So a lot of water intensive sectors can be set up there, and we invest there. And there is also a lot of other minerals like coal deposits, uranium, tin, and also polymetals, which you can have. So in terms of percentage, it's like if you take the entire Asia Pacific region, Russia has around 81% of diamond reserves, 51% of timber, 37% of fresh water, 33% of aquatic and biological resources, 32% of gold, 27% of natural gas, and 17% of oil. If you take the entire Asia Pacific region, these are the huge percentages that are contributed by Russia. So I just gave you some sectors in which Russia has a lot of opportunity. So these you can think of both as sectors from whom we can import to India, and also there are investment opportunities to get into Russia. And also agricultural production is another major area. There is a huge arable land that is available, and also pastures and hay fields. And in some of the parts of Russia, even in some of the again these forestern regions, the southern part of these regions, and so on, the vegetation season lasts from 130 to 200 days. So that's good enough. It's a long enough time. So those are also other kind of things. Also in terms of transportation, also there is the Trans-Siberian railways, Baikal-Amur, and so on. So they're quite efficient. So a lot of movements of goods, cargo turnover from the ports into the territories can be relatively easy with this infrastructure. And if you take the shortest sea route from Asia to Europe, it's actually through the Russia's Far East and the seas of Arctic Ocean. And fortunately, or basically unfortunately, but in this context, fortunately, the climate scientists are predicting that after 2050, this part of Arctic Ocean will become available for year-round passage of vessels without an ice class. And even now, it can be competitive even today when transporting goods from Northeast Asia. So this is another major thing, which is going to take some time. It's not something somebody can imagine right now, but that's something that we are taking cognizance of from the government side and also industries, so that this can actually enhance our overall transportation as well. It's not only just export and import relationship, it's also transportation. In terms of investments, Russians have been offering a lot of incentives for both Russian companies and foreign companies in some of those territories. The way we have some incentives for northeastern territory regions, so they also have some incentives for some of the territories. For example, they have a corporate income tax holiday and going to 0% for the first few years, and similarly 0% tax on property and land, and then they have reduction in tariffs of insurance payments to state extra budgetary funds. So typically that is like 30%, but they're reducing it to 7.6% recently. And similarly, the tax rate on mineral extraction has been reduced to close to 0% for 10 years. Then they have also have customs procedure of free customs zone. Then they also talk about accelerated return of VAT when exporting products. When you're exporting products from there, they return the VAT very quickly, value added tax. Similarly, the building permits and commissioning is also accelerated, and the environmental impact audit is very quick. So we all know that's something something that is in democracies, it is uncompromisable. Like our country, we take a lot of time, which is good for the environment, but at the same time, sometimes it affects the business. Whereas there, given the structure they have in their economy, they have this luxury of accelerating the audit time. And they are also simplifying the procedure for immigration, employment of foreign citizens. So similarly, there are many such things, and in the discussions that you are having now with the Russians, there are a lot of specific proposals on collaborations between the two countries. For example, in technology, digital sector, in many ways, we are actually advanced in some of those sectors where we can support them. In some of the other aspects, particularly AI and science and technology, like neurotechnologies and so on, they are also quite advanced, so we can learn from them. We can do a lot of collaborations there. And in terms of sectors, as I already mentioned, coal mining and energetics is a major sector, and it both for imports from Russia and also the investment potential. And in terms of extraction of hydrocarbons, oil and gas, again, there is a huge resource potential there. And I also already talked about the infrastructure benefits there and so on. And there is also investment potential. A lot of different, specific items we can talk about here, like liquefied natural gas. I can talk about acetic acid, polyethylene, methanol, uh, paraxylene, polyethylene film and pipes, both liquefied hydrogen. Given our focus on hydrogen, that we are aiming to become a global hub for hydrogen. So here again, we can have some collaborations. Then we have mineral fertilizers, and so on. And also, obviously, we have a long-standing collaboration with Russia for several decades on research and technology, science and technology, scientific know-how, geoscientific space collaborations, and so on, geology, and so on. In terms of agriculture, so far I was talking about mining, science, and technology. Now, if you think about agriculture, there are they have, as I mentioned earlier, pretty huge land bank, a lot of arable land that is available. So one can there is a lot of potential to do like poultry farming, dairy, meat, cattle breeding, soybean, corn, wheat, rice, barley, colza, and so on. So we depend on many countries for things like soybean, and there is some opportunity there, because for us agriculture is very important. We have a thriving agricultural sector, but there are certain products that we can import, and we have to import basically because of our climatic conditions. Soybean is an example where we can depend on countries like Russia, in addition to our regular sources like US and so on. And then in terms of again, I already talked about mining, but diamonds is worth a special mention, because there is huge diamond reserves there, and as you all know, we are the in our export basket, gems and jewelries are a major part, and diamonds are a very important part there. And whether you take whatever measure you think of, whether you think of the largest sector of exports from India, or if you take India as the largest player in the world, in any form, gems and jewelry sectors would be in the top priority for us. So that can get a big boost with the Russian diamonds. Then you have tourism, mutual tourism, where India's Indians going to Japan for tourism, and Russians coming here for tourism. So that has a huge potential there, and a lot of joint projects can be done between the two countries. Then you have a lot of collaborations that can be in education, for higher education, and collaborations between universities and so on. And there could be joint investments and cooperation as well. So these are all like some broad aspects. So now I wanted to also discuss briefly about a recent program organized by the Embassy of India in Moscow, along with the Trade Promotion Council of India. So they submitted a report to us on the multi-sector India-Russia buyer-seller meet, which was held very recently. So it's a very latest kind of information. So May 11 to 14, it happened this month. So this meeting was organized to understand the current demand scenario in Russia for certain focus sectors, which we discussed before, and explore opportunities to serve this demand, particularly in view of this current situation, the existing economic and geopolitical situation. And this was actually attended by around 50 Indian exporters from sectors like ceramics, chemicals, ingredients, and agri and food sectors, and so on, and people from the Trade Promotion Council of India, which is an autonomous institution. So that comes under the Ministry of Commerce. So they had gone and they reported this to us at NITI Aayog. So they got an opportunity to interact with 400 plus screened Russian buyers and trade visitors. So in this, they got a lot of insights in this meeting. So one set of insights were very positive on the opportunities that we are getting there, and there are also some bottlenecks and difficulties, which probably we as policymakers have to address some of them, and you as industry leaders can address some of them. So the first thing is that we were told by the team, TPCI, Trade Promotion Council of India team, that the country, Russia, is facing potential shortages in key product areas because of sanctions. So they are currently facing supply constraints, and they are interested in exploring India as an alternative sourcing hub. However, there are some major issues faced by the exporters in this market that need to be addressed. So I'll come to some of these aspects, but before that, I will briefly talk about some of the sectors where this shortage exists and where we have a lot of opportunity. One is food retailers, food products, food processing can be hugely, they can have huge positive impact there. So processed food items were very well appreciated by the Russian buyers in meetings with delegates. So India should explore more processed and value-added food exports in this market. So please think about this, keep this in mind. Second thing that we came to know is that inorganic chemicals are high in demand in Russia. Currently, they are sourcing them from China and Vietnam. Similarly, pharmaceuticals, textiles, and medical equipment are also in high demand. So that is also something to think about. Logistics issues are being faced in transit and transportation of consignments, particularly the chemicals used in making of headlights of automobiles and tanks. The reason is that these are highly inflammable, and so they cannot be airlifted. And due to the ongoing conflicts, the shipping is also restricted. So even sample exports are difficult to happen because of these logistical issues. So people are figuring out. And of course, there are challenges which we are, we are working with several stakeholders to understand how to take them, fix them. So, for example, the Russian companies would like to take the goods on credit of 6 to 9 months. So that's a huge delay I'm not sure what is a typical time delay there, but 6 to 9 months, I think, by any standards is a long time. So the feeling that we got was that the Indian exporters need protection, more so when the exchange rate is very volatile. Maybe our colleagues at Export Credit Guarantee Corporation can provide some relief. But when I spoke to them, I think uh, currently they are quite reluctant because of the reasons that we all know, because of the high risk involved here. So, but that's something to think about. Good cover for the period. Uh, but the local banks in Russia are giving cover in lieu of contracts with some of the leading food retailers. And then there is also a confusion about currency, whether to accept payments in rupee or rubles. The only bank accepting payment right now is HDFC Bank. That's what we heard. So that's another challenge that exists, that is yet to be resolved. And there are also logistical issues in transit and transportation of consignments, and that I just mentioned, and that is very sensitive for some of these chemicals in headlights and so on. And one thing that we are working in India, we are working on is uh, the the enormous procedures that we have, paper formalities, submissions of documents, and so on. We are pushing for minimizing all these hurdles so that the exports can happen smoothly. Single window clearance and things like that we have been discussing, and the efforts that the Ministry of Commerce and Industry is taking to accelerate some of those things can go a long way. But that's a very general issue that's there for not only with Russia but many other countries. We have that. But unfortunately, many a times these costs become so high, because of which China takes a precedence. Like Chinese products become more competitive when we compare to this, and you all as industrialists, better than me on these kind of challenges. So these are, like, I wanted to just be very uh, uh, you know frank in terms of both opportunities and difficulties, including some difficulties from our end in the government, so which we have to work on. We are on the job, but things will take time. So I just wanted to be frank on that. But last but not the least, I also wanted to mention a very general word of caution that things are very uncertain globally. So if you are, I can think of 3 4 types of companies in the mix. Some of you can maybe, I think most of you may be exporting a lot to the West, European and US and other countries. And maybe you're looking to diversify a little bit into Russia. So there, I think one has to be very careful. So you have to really understand what are the repercussions. Would that have any implication on your buyers in the West? That's something to think about, or maybe have some frank conversations with the buyers and so on. More than frank conversations, maybe try to understand the policies in the West. Are they going to restrict us in any way? So that is one thing. And secondly, you also have to think about what's the other kinds of companies which already are transacting a lot with Russia. I think this is the time for them to accelerate, because they have been already doing a lot with Russia. So for them, probably there is no constraint about the other countries. So you can accelerate your trade with Russia, trade and investments with Russia. And then for others who are getting into exports, you are more focusing on domestic production, and this is the first time you're going to export, or get into foreign investments, getting into Russia and so on. There also, I think it's a good opportunity to explore. But again, I think there will be a lot of steep learning involved in this, given the challenges here. So I think these are some broad observations I had. So I can end the conversation for now, and then I can start answering questions. But is there? I can look at the questions on the chat and start answering. But if there's anything else, please let me know. But otherwise, I can start going through the questions and answering them.
Thank you, Doctor. I just request anyone, if they have questions, they could post it in the chat. Doctor, if you're good to read and answer the questions, you could do that, or I could read them out to you. I mean, however you're comfortable.
No, actually, I'm able to read them, so I can
Great.
myself do it.
Absolutely.
And I most likely I may not have answers for most of them, but I can just try.
No, fair enough. You've done a great job navigating our ship through these, really troubled waters with what is happening with respect to Russia currently. Yeah. Please.
Thank you.
The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Rakesh Bhatt is asking, what is your thought about solar panel system? Will this market grow in future, and how Indian government will support this market? Absolutely, it's a priority area for the government. I think this is not Russia specific question; it's a general question. But absolutely, in general, solar panel is a very important thing given our net zero commitments, and as of now. Solar energy is one of the leading renewable sources. Whether we go into green hydrogen or any other kind of energy, the underlying source is going to be solar. And given our intention of minimizing our dependence on other countries, particularly China, there is a huge market for us in India itself for solar panel. But if you are able to compete with the Chinese, then we can also export a lot. And in terms of government support, definitely I have to check if the PLIs may cover the sector, because PLI does cover some of the semiconductor devices, and so on. So some of the related commodities are supported by PLI, but yes, there is always going to be some kind of incentives for the renewables in general. So Mr. Harsh Mittal has a question on what is the potential for construction materials such as sandwich panels, rock wool panels, PU panels, etc. in Russia, how to contact the potential buyers. I'm not familiar with this. It's a very specific business question. I don't know. Frank answer is I don't know, but I would encourage Mr. Mittal to connect with me. I can try to connect him with Russians who can potentially help. So maybe that's something we can help on. Mr. Ashwin Deria asks how to contact Russian buyers and how banking transactions can happen in the present scenario. Yes, it's a difficult situation, as I also mentioned. The banking as of now, HDFC is the only bank that's accepting transactions. The rupee ruble interchange is still not very clearly defined. So it's a difficult day right now. It's on credit basis, as I mentioned. They are looking for 6 to 9 months credit. So things are evolving here. Yes, Mr. Vikas Derolia asks, can we do in Indian rupee because of the USD sanction? Yes, USD is out of question. We're only talking about rupee or ruble. Mr. Sachin Parekh asks how to contact the potential buyers in Russia. Is there any good, reliable data available on the same? Again, Mr. Ashish Gupta asked a similar question. Best way to identify genuine Russian buyers. For to both of you, my answer is not very clear. I myself, we at the government, we don't have any right now. But having said that, we can potentially contact our embassy there and also the Russian counterparts and try to get some vetting done from the buyers. So it's a risky territory, but I think this is where we can step in a collaborative way. Different government agencies and Russians also. Any scope for electronic instruments? Yes, in terms of I think I mentioned some of the technological collaborations. and there definitely electronics also feature in, and I think uh, uh, the electronic items there. I think one thing is, um, I'm not completely sure how this is going to work, but we all know that the lot of electronic goods have from US and Europe have been stopped being exported to Russia because of the sanctions. So we are still figuring out, particularly I am personally quite interested in understanding how uh, we can fill in that vacuum, because Russia itself doesn't have a huge industry. Mostly the brands are all global, mainly US and Chinese. So obviously there is a vacuum there, but Chinese brands are doing well there. They're able to navigate through the system there. But how are we going to do that? That's something to think about. But I see that there is an opportunity there, but my answer is not very clear on how exactly to tap into the opportunity. So how to contact Russian companies willing to invest in India through joint ventures? A great question, Mr. Hashmittal. Again, we can do whatever possible from the government side. Maybe the DPIIT part of Ministry of Commerce and the embassy, the Indian embassy in Russia, the Russian embassy here, so they can all help. I think this is related to the other question about buyers as well. The answer is very similar. Yes, Mr. Ashwin Dedia, dehydrated food products and spices can be a great sector to be focusing on Russia. So as I mentioned, food products are in great demand there, and these are exactly those kind of food products which are non-perishable and can be have longer shelf life. Mr. Vishak Balachandran, what would be the potential for exporting of building material, especially raised access floor plans to Russia, and what would be the best way to contact? Yes, again, apologies. I don't know the exact details here, but maybe I think with all these questions, it appears to me that we may have to go back and get some contacts provided. So which is something I can do. I'll go back, talk to my colleagues, and get back to you. Maybe I can provide some contacts to Mr. Sangvi, who can then distribute to all of you. I think that will answer a lot of the questions here. I think on receiving money also, the same question, same answer as before. The credit thing and rupees. How we can export LED, smart solution, digital transformation. Yes, again, these are great products in both countries. Uh, all this stuff, but there are two difficulties there. One is some of this you're talking about consulting and so on. There is also a language barrier there. Whenever services trade comes into picture with countries like Russia and Ukraine, a big thing is the language barrier. So once you navigate through, it becomes easier. And those are relatively easy to export given that it can be done remotely. So the connectivity, if you're talking about the internet connectivity and so on, I think at least in Russia, it will be relatively better. But if you're talking about the other type of connectivity, again, it boils down to the contacts, the question that you already asked, which I will get back. And engineering components, sheet metal enclosures, industries. I think there is some scope for it, but also we should remember that Russia has a lot of capacity in many of these kind of sectors. So we have to be careful on what exactly is needed there. Capital equipment, made in India capital equipment export to Russia. However, principal companies engaged in manufacturing are of EU origin. I think the rules of origin are not very rigorously enforced now. So in that sense, if it is made in India, if there is some with some origin, I think it should be acceptable. So if you are willing to explore, you can explore that. Food products, yes, definitely all these products like peanut butter, honey, are all good. Mr. Rakesh, but this recording is being done. What is the scope for Ayurvedic medicines and health supplementary products? Yes, that's a Mr. Sachin Parekh. That's a great question, and I think it needs a lot of marketing there. Like they first have to get on boarded with Ayurvedic medicines, and now we have this nutraceuticals, nutritional pharmaceuticals, which also are in great demand globally, and also in Russia. What is the scope of Mr. Atul Saxena? What is the scope of pre-engineered buildings in Russia? We are okay, turnkey products. Okay, again, it's about getting contacts, which will try our best to help. As Ukraine and Russia is not fully manufacturing steel, so in this case, which will be a good market for Indian to export the steel? Okay, don't fully understand the question from Mr. Jeet Shekhawat. Basically, you're saying that we have a market, we can export steel to Ukraine and Russia since they don't have manufacturing capacity. Yes, that's true. That also came in the discussions before. So thank you, Mr. Atul Saxena, for your context. And what is the possibility of importing base oils and solvents for industries, Mr. Gaurav Kalia? In terms of importing these base oil and solvents, they do have supplies for many of these things. It's just logistics that has to be figured out, given the difficulties in transportation, given the current issues, particularly to the extent that there is some inflammability and so on. It's difficult to airlift them. So we have to go to the general shipping route, and that may be difficult. So Mr. Vivek Noronha just typed in FTA. So we don't have any free trade agreement with Russia, but we do have good relations with them. Both of us have relatively high tariffs with each other, but despite that, the trade is happening. We are in the discussions to promote trade between the two countries. But as of now, there has been no discussion on reducing the tariffs. That's a great question, Mr. Kaushal Shah, about credit. I think this is a point that we can raise with the Russians, that if they are seeking credit, why don't they give credit to us? So this is something we can discuss. We are as I mentioned to you earlier, in the process of an agreement with the Russians on several substantive issues. This is actually between NITI Aayog and the Far East ministry there. And that is one of the reasons for this discussion I'm having with you, because I'm also looking for inputs, and I already from many of these points I'm also getting a lot of inputs, because frankly from our side we weren't very sure what are the things that we should push for, we should ask for. So this discussion is one way for us to get some inputs. So we got some of the questions you asked are actually inputs for that, so we'll take them into consideration. This credit is a great point, seeking credit. Mr. Ashwin, can we explore? Oh, okay. You want to travel and explore more possibilities? Yes, you're definitely welcome. I would probably you can also I can also provide you among the list of contacts that I'm going to provide, Mr. Singhvi. I'll also provide the contacts of TPCI, Trade Promotion Council of India, which took the lead of all these things. This last week's visit to Russia. Maybe they can also organize another visit with your industry association. That's something that you can figure out among yourselves. I'll be happy to introduce. So the contact person in
share these details, doctor, with everyone at the end of this. We'll probably send out a mail, because
exactly I'll share
a whole
everything.
list of data that we would love to share with everyone once we get it from you.
Yeah, I will send them to you, and you can share with the entire group. So
sure.
So I think that's all. I hope I answered most of the questions.
To a great satisfaction, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Badri. There are these dark clouds of the war hovering around us, the Russia and Ukraine war. and you're probably showing us the silver lining in all of that, with actually encouraging trade with Russia at this point in time. And I think it's quite an eye opener that the opportunities that these things are throwing up for India, being with the stand India has taken. What I honestly would love to do is I would love to share this chat with you so that you have a list of questions and interested areas that areas of interest that people have. Would it also be all right if I ask everyone to kind of share their areas of interest and share this with you, and we can get detailed information? I could send out a mail or a Google form to everyone on the chat, maybe as soon as tomorrow or Monday morning, and maybe share those details with you, and we could get a more detailed response which we could then share with everyone.
Absolutely, that will be wonderful.
And I would also look forward if you could share the contact details like you mentioned on the chat with all the associated associations that would be really helpful for everyone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to share my contact details. And
Sure.
also, now we are talking about Russia, but in general, we want to promote as much dialogue discussion as possible about trade in general, exports, imports in general. So please feel free to contact me, provide any inputs that you want to provide overall about our trade policy, trade constraints that you're facing and so on. So we'll be happy to hear. We are here to hear from you and act upon that.
Sure. Thank you. I think it's a great beginning, and we would love to host you whenever you're in Bombay and, give you a bigger platform to share details with our members. Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's a really insightful discussion, and we seriously look forward to taking this up further, and would love to host you in person and hear you in person if and when you're in Bombay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sangvi, and
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for staying online for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Badri.
Thank you.